Welcome back to another episode of The Good, The Bad, The Verdict. And today I'm going to be talking about the M1 Mac Mini. And this is such an interesting machine. So I've been using the M1 Mac Mini for a couple of months now. Ever since I came out, I got it and I've been using it, and it's been a fantastic little device. I bought the cheapest spec you could get for any M1 Mac. So this is the Mac Mini with the 8 gigs of GPU, 8 gigs of CPU, and 8 gigs of unified memory, which is their language now for RAM, and 256 gigs of storage. That's it. And those specs will run you $699. Now, $699 for that spec doesn't sound too crazy, but the performance, the real world performance translation is a very different story. So let's start with the good. And on the topic of performance, the performance of these M1 machines is beyond understandable. Like, I knew they would be good. I didn't understand just how good they would be. So this $700 machine was keeping up with my $4,000 two-year-old MacBook Pro. It's crazy how big of a leap these are and how much you actually don't have to spend anymore to get that power that you need. For someone like me, that's great, because the next time I'm going to buy a computer, I don't have to pay $4,000. I think I could spend half of that and get away with it. Now that, these computers are just so much more powerful. The performance is great. And I did an entire video covering the performance differences between this and my MacBook Pro, which I'll have in a card up here. So go watch that for sure. I think that's a very interesting video, and it'll show you guys the differences. Sure, it doesn't beat in every aspect, but there's just some aspects where the M1 Mac Mini completely impresses. Not just the Mac Mini per se, every M1 computer just impresses. And to think that this is going to be the slowest Apple Silicone chip we're going to see, it completely rewires your brain. Another thing that is unbelievable about this, just so good, is that it barely ever turns on the fan. I don't think I heard the fan even once in the 2.5 or 3 months I've been using this computer, and I have pushed it to the max. It has gone to the point where the computer slows down and apps start to really slow down, but the fan still doesn't kick on. Now, that's not because the fans are defective, it's just because this computer, this chipset, it doesn't get too hot, and the cooling, not only does it have active cooling, there's so much space inside the Mac Mini that there's just a lot of airflow in there, and things just work. And temperature barriers have never been a problem for this. This doesn't get hot either. Even when it's under full load, I have touched the machine just to make sure that the fans, if it's hot or not, it's not hot. It's decently warm, but not even close to what hot should be. And it's so incredible how quiet these machines are. When I switched back to my MacBook Pro after testing this, which was a couple weeks ago, and moved this as not my main computer to edit, I was so frustrated immediately with the MacBook Pro because of how much noise the damn fan makes. It drives me nuts. Immediately when I start editing videos and using Photoshop and all that, the fans just stay on, and it's so frustrating. But this is so silent that, you know what, I'd actually even be willing to take a performance hit if this wasn't something I did for work and had to make, so many videos on. I almost can justify that performance hit for a quiet fan, almost fanless experience. Now, being a new platform, the Apple Silicone, these M1 chips, there were concerns from other people that the applications that are based on Intel for Intel machines, they wouldn't be as smooth. Now, it's not been the perfect experience, but for almost every app I use, it's been very smooth, especially from the ones from the big developers. I had to install the Rosetta 2 app one time. So the first time I opened, I believe it was, where did I start? I think I either started with Lightroom or Photoshop. One or the other, I don't remember, but I started that. And before that application started working, the computer asked me, hey, you need to install Rosetta 2 for this to work. It was a one-time installation, took me less than a minute, installed, all good to go, and it never bothered me again. And they work just as it would on any Intel computer. Most people, 99 people, if you didn't tell them this was an Apple Silicone Mac, they would not know. It's that smooth. The performance and the application support across the board for the time being for the big apps is pretty killer, and it makes me think just how great this entire transition experience has been. What also surprised me is Apple's unified memory seems to be doing things a little bit differently than traditional RAM does, because I've used computers with 8 gigs of RAM. I used Apple computers with 8 gigs of RAM, and this just handles applications so much better compared to them. It manages to keep more applications open and without getting crazy, slowing them down until you hit crazy barriers. This computer does a fantastic job with RAM management, and I think all Apple computers. So, I think that it's so cool. It's the performance, the way it's tweaked, especially if you use Apple software, particularly things like Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, the Apple suite of softwares for creation, for things like that. This is just, the M1 platform is unbelievably good. You just can't get the same level of power to performance to output like these computers. And as I was saying, it's just, this is completely realigned what I think a computer needs to be, how much specs I need to have. Because if I can get away with 8 gigs of RAM and no dedicated GPU on an Apple computer, just makes me think, how powerful something with just 16 gigs of RAM and maybe a more dedicated GPU could get. Nothing too crazy, but just a dedicated GPU. That would probably run way faster than my MacBook Pro, because the MacBook Pro 15-inch that I have barely stays ahead of this Mac Mini, and that's when it has a 4 gig dedicated graphics card, it's got 32 gigs of RAM and all these loaded out specs, and it still only managed to just barely beat the M1 Mac Mini. So that's a real big gap there. So not everything with this computer is perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. And this one, I think there aren't too many, but there are the things that are bad on this are really just annoying and really bad. So number one is the lack of I/O on the back. It's frustrating. This is very bare minimum. 2 USB-Cs, 2 USB-As, an HDMI, a 3.5 millimeter audio jack, an Ethernet cable, and that's it. And you have a power cable. There's nothing more on this. And that's so weird considering that the outgoing model, the Intel version of this, had 4 USB-Cs. They had Thunderbolt ports as well, I believe. It was just so much more better equipped. And it's like, I don't know why they did this. I think there were some limiting factors with the M1 chip itself that caused this, but for a desktop, you need more ports than this. This is not a computer, like a laptop, where I want to put a dongle in. So that caused me to buy an expensive dongle, not a dongle, but a dock actually, to connect to this. And that became a requirement at a certain point, which is frustrating. You shouldn't have to do that with a desktop-grade computer, in my opinion. And while I was saying that most apps work pretty smoothly, there's one type of app that constantly gave me frustrating issues, and that is any type of NTFS software reader just didn't work. Now, why I need NTFS software readers is because Apple doesn't support NTFS drives in the system natively. So that means I have to install an application that adds support for it. NTFS is the format that big hard drives use, large hard drives. Now, what ended up happening was a year or two ago, when I got a couple of the large hard drives that I use for backup and storage, I started using them in NTFS format, and that's what they've been. So now I'm stuck where I can't reformat those drives because of all the data they have, and this computer just wouldn't read them. I have paid software. This is not like a free software. Like, I have paid software that still does not support the M1 Mac, and this is the case even now in early January. NTFS support is very bare minimum, and this is the case, I think, for a lot of niche softwares and applications. There are definite gaps here with the M1 system, but again, with a transition this big, I think it's acceptable. It's just, if you're somebody who relies on a lot of niche little softwares and things to run, maybe avoid this. It just will take a little bit more time for things to develop. Another issue that I think I've noticed a lot of people complain about on Twitter is there are Bluetooth issues with this, and I've tried to figure out what it is. It's crazy. So let me explain what happens. So I have an Apple trackpad and an Apple Magic Keyboard. Both are wireless. They both connect through Bluetooth, and with any other device, once you have them connected, that's it. You don't have to worry about them at all. With this, it was the same when I started, but as time went on, what I've seen and noticed is suddenly the connection will drop and it'll reconnect, but if you don't use it for even 2 seconds, it'll disconnect again. And then you have to tap and wait for it to reconnect. And that's just been extremely frustrating. Like, it drops the Bluetooth connection, and the only thing that seems to fix it is a restart. Or you use those wired in. So you plug in a cable to the computer and plug it into the keyboard. Then you can use it without any disruptions because now they're using the cable. But it's so frustrating to have to deal with that. And I've been waiting. There have been 2 updates, I think, to Big Sur since I've gotten this computer, and both of them didn't fix this issue. I was really hoping they did. It still continues to be a thorn in my side, and I have ended up having to use a USB mouse and not the trackpad, and just, you know, if the issues does come, I have to restart. It's a big annoyance, and this is something Apple definitely needs to take a big look at, because this does completely hamper usability. Another issue I have with this computer is, I think now at this point is nitpicking, but the design is very outdated. There's a lot more from the teardowns I've seen on this computer. There's space in there for a lot more, so either put more stuff in or make the frame smaller, make this a smaller computer. Now, I will let this slide a little bit because they have retained a $700 price point, so maybe if they put in a brand new design and brand new everything, maybe that price wouldn't have stayed so low. But still, I think it's fair enough to say that there could be a better use of space and a little bit more put into this, just based on how much, you know, what the size of this computer is. It's virtually the same size as the 2010 Mac Mini launched way back in the day. Definitely the same size as the 2014 when they ditched the CD drive. So it's a pretty weird thing just to see how unchanged it is from the outside over the last 7-8 years. And finally, the bad. There honestly aren't more powerful versions of this right now, and I think that's a big mistake. There needs to be more powerful versions of this machine right now in the lineup, because the lineup is a very confused lineup. So there's this base model, then there's a slightly upgraded one with more storage, and then beyond that, you need to get an Intel Mac Mini, which is actually not as powerful as these ones, and that costs $1,000. So this lineup is very confused. The only good value in this lineup, I honestly believe, is the cheapest one, the $700 one. Or if you could justify the upgrade to the more storage, okay, I get it, that works as well. But don't buy this right now if you're not somebody who's a very light user. I think in the sense very light, meaning you don't do a lot of usage, you know, just maybe a little bit of photo editing here or there, watching movies, emails, you know, stuff like that, you'll be absolutely fine. But anything more, I think the capabilities are still yet to be realized fully on this. I think there will be more versions with more powerful chips, and those will definitely be the ones for people who are looking to replace their workstation, where you'll work on this, you know, where you'll need heavy software running. I think there's still a little bit of time there. So that's, I think, the real issue I have with this computer. So finally, what is the verdict? I think that there are a few teething issues, but the verdict is very simple. Buy. You can buy this computer with your eyes closed, especially if you go for that $700 base spec. I don't think there's anything that'll give you the same bang for buck, especially if you're using Apple software like Final Cut Pro or iMovie or stuff. The performance is unbelievable, especially for $700. It's hard to believe what you get. In reality, the pricing is so good that it's so un-Apple-like. It almost shocks me in a way that this is so well priced. And of all the new Mac Mini machine, of all the new M1 machines, I think this is the one to go for, even more than the MacBook Air or MacBook Pro. Now, if you're looking for laptops, that's a different story. But I think if you're flexible with what kind of desktop or solution you need, I think that the Mac Mini is such a great choice in this lineup, especially since you only pay $700. You save a lot of money for buying, you know, the monitor you want, the keyboard you want, the stuff you want, you can place and make your own workstation, personalize it more than just getting a MacBook off the shelves, which is weird when you look at it, but still, I think it's a great option for a lot of people, and it's just a fantastic little machine, and I'm very happy with it, and I think most people will be too. So that's it for this one, guys. If you have any questions about the M1 Mac Mini, let me know down in the comments below. I will definitely try to answer those for you, and if you haven't already, be sure to follow me on social media. I'll have all the handles right here on the screen, and of course down in the description below. If you want to check out some accessories for the Mac Mini or the Mac Mini itself, I'll have them all listed down in the description, and other M1 Macs as well, so go check that out over there. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.